This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode contains spoilers from the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas, as well as discussions surrounding domestic abuse and physical violence.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the YA literature and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we're talking about A Court of Wings and Ruin. ACOWAR for those in the fandom, and to me it should be called, oh my god, just say what you're thinking out loud. Oh my god, this could all be avoided. Please just talk to each other.
Drama. So I guess from what you may have known from previous episodes, I am new to this whole fantasy thing, and I've always been leaning heavily into Laura, specifically with ACOTAR as my point of reference to begin everything. And Laura Google did not exist anymore. She said, do not look anything up. Do not look at fan art. You will get spoilers. I am your Google now.
I will do all of this for you. Let me do this for you.
She censored everything. But I'm also somebody who I love surprises. I love good surprises. I'm not someone who's like, oh, yay, bad surprise. Nobody likes a bad surprise. So I love this journey. She TikToks, images, fan art. So in this process, as I've been pitching I've been using my PR skills to pitch this series to my other friends. I have been giving them the same instructions. But I digress. So I've had to look back on my notes. I've only finished this book in September, and I still can't handle a reread yet. Laura, I think, has reread it for the 5th time, so we'll be diving into that today. I don't know, where's our jumping off point? What do you say, Laura?
I think it's important to point out that when I was pitching this series to you, I told you that after Mist and Fury, if you were done, you were done. This book was not something that you needed to read. And I don't love this book at all. I could take or leave it. But I remember you loved this book.
I loved this. I remember I need to call you again after it was over. And I feel so bad because you were getting ready for your brother-in-law's wedding. You're like, I have some time, but we could chat. So thank you for that. Sorry, Jean, if you're listening. But it was just, I think this probably, it comes back to what we talked about in the second episode of the importance of that found family. And I think that is why I loved this one so much, is because you learn more about the characters, and it's not just about Feyre and Rhys. There's pockets of information of additional characters that you want to know, and their relationships with each other as friends, as professionals, as family. And I loved that you got to see and learn so much more than just being people who are just there floating around in the background.
That's true. And the found family trope was really hammered in hard in this book. When I was re-listening to this, I was trying to kind of keep a count in my head of how many times Sarah J. Maas used certain words. And my family, it must have been 10,000. All the time during the battle, when they're just having dinner, when they're separated. But
it's interesting because I think this is the first time that she felt that she had a family too. I mean, she has sisters, she has a father. Yeah, they're related by blood, but what do they say in Supernatural? Blood don't mean family.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I feel like that is really, it hits here.
It must. It must. I think the family is kind of the motivating factor in her, I don't know, decisions to do everything. Although I have to say the found family trope was sidetracked with me by the the self-sacrificing trope, which was also hammered in so hard in this book. It was so I said I reread this. I finished this about 2 hours ago. Is my like fourth, I think, all the way through read of this. And the found family trope is fine. The self-sacrificing trope really started to bother me. And the foreshadowing is just so obvious, like now that I'm so familiar with the story.
And I was going to ask you, do you feel like the foreshadowing hits more, maybe not hits more, but you're more aware of it now because you've read it for a fourth time? Or is it because there have been some influences on TikTok that we're seeing that other people are pointing out and you're just like, oh, I didn't think of it that way? Or, bringing in other people's perceptions and perspectives to this fourth read?
That's a good question. I think once you can kind of take out the emotion of it, it's just so glaringly obvious. Like, Amren is an angel. It is so fucking clear that she is an angel. Just, they paint blood over their doors. They like sacrifice all, it's, oh my God.
She prefers lamb's blood. Like,
yeah.
That's even from the second book.
She said her father was a wrathful god. It's like, gee, what could that be? Like obviously she's an angel. And I remember after this book came out, everyone was like, what is Amren? What is Amren? What is Amren? It's like, well, I mean, duh. We know, we know what Amren is. So yeah, I using that as an example, I think that the foreshadowing is just so completely blatant. And, that's good on Sarah though, because she like sprinkles it throughout, and it's taken this many read-throughs to really see everything that she put there, because the first few times are so emotional.
I was going to say, I think that's also a testament to her writing, because even when I think of rating books on Goodreads, I think of it as, am I rating it because of content or how I felt? And more or less, I've been rating the books based on how I felt. And I think that's where how so many people are passionate within the SJM community specifically is, I'm not saying that she's not a great writer. She's a good writer in the fact that she can evoke these emotions out of her readers. And you have people who are great writers, and just like college professors, they write great things. They're very factual information, but they might not necessarily, I'm not going to get super excited about certain subjects. That doesn't mean that they're not good writers. And I think Sarah has found, there's an emotional aspect of reading that gets people so immersed into these worlds.
So, Jess, when you're reading it, because I know that you love this book, what, besides the found family, really like stood out for you? What made you love this?
I think that it kind of touched on it. You had friendship, you had love, you had adventure. There was self-sacrificing. I think I liked the dynamics between not just the group as a whole, but individual relationships. You can see character growth. I think of Lucian. I've been skeptical about Lucian, but I liked him since the first book. And I remember telling you that. I don't know why. He's the sassy best friend. He's the Tommy Merlin to Oliver Queen. I liked him, but he doesn't necessarily have a mind of his own. And you start seeing that at the end of ACOMAF. And I think I just sent you a voice text from a voice message reaction from TikTok. And he's just questioning himself as a person. I think that each of the characters, there's a lot of self growth and recognition that the characters are having. And I think that's important. And it's important that it's not the same. They've all gone through different lived experiences. Feyre's questioning herself. I think there was even a scene where she's understanding that she doesn't need to seek permission. She can take ownership of the choices that she makes. And sometimes some of those choices you're they're not going to be the best, and you're going to question yourself, and you're going to fuck up. And are you going to learn from those mistakes? Or, we're all human, or even if you're all fae in this world, just because you make the mistake once doesn't mean you're going to learn your lesson. It's going to happen time and time again. I mean, how many times is Reese going to sacrifice himself to realize he doesn't have to carry the burden of saving an entire world?
Well, at least 3 so far.
So far.
So let's talk about the lack of communication between the characters in this book. I think it's a good way to kind of touch on other topics as well. But, oh my God, I know it's a plot
Where do we start?
device. I know it's a plot device, and you get the intrigue and the secrets and the drama by not discussing everything, and that's a big part of YA and just like teen TV shows. But Jesus Christ, just if Nesta could just tell everybody what she's feeling and what she went through, if people would listen to what Elaine is saying, if Moore would just confess, this is a whole other thing, if Moore would just confess everything to everyone involved, then Azriel could also confess and move on. It's just, my God.
I feel like that also mirrors life. Like, yes, absolutely, people need to communicate. That is stressed time and time again, whether you're in therapy individually, whether you're in couples therapy, whether you have therapy between business partners, and there's all these different dynamics. But at the foundation, if the communication isn't strong, that's where everything is just how you said, just fucking talk and we wouldn't be here. But that's also life. That completely mirrors life. We internalize things. We're unsure, or not only do we internalize, we create these scenarios in our head of the possibility of how they can go. And then, and then that creates the anxiety, which creates the spiral of not wanting to continue to communicate. And it's just this circling the drain aspect of how do you start? Where do you begin? How do you end? Is it going to end? It's just this catastrophic thing that goes on in your head.
So I say you're right, of course. So I'm going to give two examples. So the first example is of healthy communication. And that is when Cassian tells Feyre when they're training that he is angry with her. He's angry with her about her choices, about her not telling them that she was High Lady, that if she had, then that would have impacted how everything went down in Highburn. And he felt just that not telling him was a betrayal, and that he needed to tell her and express exactly how angry he was.
And I like that in that conversation that he has with Feyre, not only was important for him to say it for himself, I think it was important for their relationship. And it was also interesting that it not only brought up the situation immediately at hand, but the past 50 years, like he felt like Reese did the same thing 50 years ago. And here he is thinking, you're thinking you're dispensable. You're just like Reese. You keep thinking this is you're sacrificing yourself, doing for the good of others. And it's bringing up that trauma that wasn't even still really at this part of the book. It still hasn't been addressed. Even when he winnowed back from Under the Mountain to Valeris, all he did was confess his oh my gosh, she's my mate to Moore. And everybody was, nobody really knew except Moore. And it still hasn't been addressed what Reese had done.
Mm-hmm. And that is kind of a theme throughout, because there are different instances in the book, like the High Lords meeting, where they start bringing up Amarantha, they start bringing up Under the Mountain, and because it has never actually been talked about with the inner circle, it's kind of taboo. And this isn't my other example that I was going to point out, but something that I just thought of. When Nesta is having dinner with all of them, and she's there, and Amren is there, and she starts asking Amren, why are your eyes like that? Why are you what are you? And Amren is just like, no one has ever asked me these questions before. I know that's a device for us, the reader, to kind of get a little bit more background into Amren. But I also really like how Amren's like, they didn't ask it because it's fucking rude. Like, come on. And Nesta doesn't care. And she's just like, please, like, what is going on? Like, what being are you? Because she's also feeling that she doesn't have a place and she doesn't fit in, and she's trying to kind of relate to somebody. And I think that's another form of dysfunctional but also healthy communication. And just kind of jumping off from that, if you want to go to kind of a unhealthy communication, I think the whole Feyre Moore situation, it starts off as a very unhealthy communication situation.
From ACOMAF?
No, from ACOWAR. I'm talking specifically about when Feyre doesn't tell Moore that she's leaving to go find the Suriel in the battle.
Oh, okay.
And then that evolves into a fight about honesty and Moore not being honest about Azriel. And then that turns into later Moore's confession about preferring females. So it starts off very unhealthy and morphs into, I don't know, a clunky kind of.
Would you say it was healthy in the end? I mean, there was obviously resentment. I don't know if Moore, it was kind of like projecting in a way. She's frustrated at Feyre, and not to say that Feyre wasn't in the wrong. I mean, I understand where Moore is coming from to a degree, because she goes, you know, where's the truth? Where's the honesty? You're supposed to trust me. We're supposed to be not only best friends, but how can you're supposed to trust me as High Lady. If I'm supposed to be this person to you, put our friendship aside. And I think that's something that Feyre has to, I mean, again, she's 21. We're still learning it, you know, at our age. So those boundaries and learning not just where you are, but like you said, the communication of having an unhealthy communication. I guess you can consider it unhealthy. I don't want to say, oh, they just don't know how to communicate. I guess that's really just a rephrasing of the same thing.
I don't know, like Feyre, like throwing it at Moore, like, your gift is truth, but you can't even face the truth within yourself. It's like, damn, was that really necessary? Like,
but there's all this, I guess it goes back to just fucking talk.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be all this stuff in limbo in the air, because even Feyre, and when Feyre and Rhys were having their own conversation at one point, they said, she said something to Rhys about Moore and leading Az on, and Rhys is like, don't go there. Don't talk about it. This is how it is. This is how it's going to be. We're not going to address it. So everything's just constantly looming. And you don't know what, Amren saying to Nesta, that's rude, but also good for Nesta asking the real questions, because this is still completely new to her. She doesn't, and it goes back to something that we spoke about last week's episode, where you specifically mentioned, this isn't our world. We're used to certain cultural norms, things that are accepted by society. And Nesta's still mentally in a human world. So even if that's not acceptable in a human world, that might be acceptable in the Fae. And Amren all the more respects her for it, even though she says it's rude.
No, you're exactly right. Exactly right. Going back to things looming above you because no one's talking about it, it has to be addressed in the books that are coming. But Lucian and being Helian's son.
Yeah, how did Feyre connect the dots? I can't remember where she goes, huh?
Oh my God, it's actually kind of dumb. She's looking at Helian. She's like, huh, he's got the same nose and smile as Lucian. And then Helian starts talking about how he saved Lucian's mom when she was on the run during the First War. And Feyre's like, you had an affair. And Helian's like, a gentleman never talks. And then she sees Lucian. She's like, oh my God, they're the same. It's very loose.
Okay, so it wasn't, it was just kind of like, I feel maybe it was like a throwaway thing at the time.
I don't know, because by the end of the book, in that last, like one of the last scenes where, you know, after the war, everybody's together and they're
at the house.
Yeah. And she's like, and there's Lucian with his father that he doesn't know is his father. Like it was one of the final points that was really drilled
so
in.
that'll definitely come up in Silver Flames.
Right.
And that I'm making that assumption, people, because look at the cover. It can't not be part of it at some point.
And just to remind the listeners, we will be doing a recap of all of the Silver Flame news before the book is released. So we have all this time.
There's going to be so much. You're going to have all these podcasts with all the Silver Flames. And when we all are done binging and then reading again, because we tried to get through it so fast, I think this will be great to kind of share everybody's perspectives and remind everybody, okay, what has happened in the last however many years since the first book came out?
For real. Kind of the last couple of things I want to talk about under communication is the two things. The healthy communication between Cass and Nesta at the very...
Is it healthy?
I think so. At the very end, when they think Hybern is going to kill them, and and Cassian, he kisses her and he's like, I have no regrets except for we didn't have time together, and I'll find you in another life. And Nesta doesn't answer him, of course, but she throws her body over him, and they're clutching each other knee to knee, and they will go into the afterlife together. So is about as healthy communication as we can expect from Nesta at this point.
That part reminds me of when Amren says, like, mother, help us when you unleash what's inside you. That whole battle scene, you see the worry in her eyes because they've had something, not to go down the Silver Flames discussion from last week, but there's something inherently there since before Nesta turned High Fae. She, especially when he would, from Wings and Ember, he was at their house. And then even after this pivotal scene, where there's the extra excerpt in the Frost and Starlight where she's hooking up with somebody, but at the same time, people are scared to hook up with her because they know who she is in the Fae community. They know who her brother-in-law is. And then everybody knows this thing that she has with Cassian. Cassian's the leader of the entire Night Court military. So everyone's really hesitant to even, it's like when you're, like a frat sweetheart, nobody wants to go near you.
For real, like off limits.
You're like, please, come on. I swear I'm not terrible.
It's a good point. We're going to talk about at the end of this episode, Tamlin and his issues.
Tamlin.
But we're going to save him for the end. I think the last point I want to make about communication is the weird nonverbal communication that is going on between Mor and Cassian in this book. I really picked up on it this read through. He is very physical with Mor in a way that we did not get in Mist and Fury. And I know we're focusing on all the other characters a lot more in this book. So, conceivably, maybe they were always this touchy-feely, but I feel like Cassian, specifically, I'll just say the scene, specifically when Cassian has a sore, maybe broken wrist, and Nesta starts bandaging it up, and they're holding each other and looking at each other, and then Mor comes and he snatches his hand away,
right,
and Nesta is just sitting there the fuck, and then she gets up and leaves. So why did he do that? Everybody knows that he has this thing with Nesta? Why did he do that? And then in another scene that really stood out, and Sarah makes a point to say, Cassian is massaging Moore's feet in the living room in the Day Court house during the High Lords meeting, like after before Helion comes in and has his whole thing. He's massaging Moore's feet. Why is he doing that?
I mean, maybe this is just not like, I don't want to say not okay. I don't want to judge other people's friendships. I personally don't have any guy friends who would just say, like, oh yeah, put your feet up. And I don't know, maybe I don't know. Maybe that's the friendship that they have after 500 years. I mean, but I can't remember. I feel like there was a point, something that I read where he's internalizing something that when Cassian took Moore's Maidenhead, as found out, he was just like, he was kind of caught between emotions because he did truly like Moore, especially when she was 17, 18. And so of course he was like, are you sure? And he was all about it. And then he knew it's just something that's kind of, again, not to use the word throughout this episode, looming between him and Moore. It's always been this thing that's kind of just been there, but they don't talk about it. They still carry on. And then even just in their friendship, I don't know if it's just, I wish I can put something on. I'm thinking of Frost and Starlight when she goes, oh yeah, Cassian didn't know what to get me, so he got her the lingerie, and he led everybody to believe like, oh, I know what you like. And she goes, haha, thanks, you always know me so well. But then she goes, don't let him fool you, I told him what to get me. There is not a guy friend that I would say, hey, I really wanted this red negligee, please can you get it for me? No, I'd just say like, hey, get me a gift card, and I'd get it myself.
I think it's really interesting. Going back to the feet rubbing, they're doing it in the same room as literally everyone else, and Az is just in the corner.
Poor Az.
And this is, of course, let's remember, this is after Az attacks Eris in the High Lords meeting. So this, you could say, because everyone says like, oh, Moore gets freaked out when Az shows his feelings or whatever. This is like a subtle way for her just to say, fuck you, Az, I'm not interested, without actually saying it. Like, Az would never, ever, ever go up and just like casually reach out and start massaging feet,
Right. But it's, I don't know if it's his dynamic with her. If I just don't, there's so many unknown variables that Cassian felt comfortable enough. But then Moore even says like she does certain actions when she feels like her and Az are like too close to anything ever happening, that she makes certain choices, like sleeping with, was it not Tarquin? Helion. Or, when she makes certain actions, or she stays out late at Rita's, even though that's a whole other thing. It's pushing somebody away. I don't know. She likes him. I just don't.
Just tell this sweet Daddy Azzy that you're not in love with him.
Daddy Azzy. Daddy Azzy.
Batty Daddy Azzy. Let this sexy man move on. Just let him down. I swear to God. Like, and it really makes me, and I know that you love Moore, but it really makes me dislike her. The fact that she can't just tell him, like, he's the best spy master in the world. He has to have some sort of idea.
But I think that's something that, and this is coming from somebody who is a cisgendered straight white female. So I don't know where she's coming from. But who's to say that she can't because she's still processing things with herself. I mean, you have people who accept themselves all the time, but they might not, internally, because obviously she does. She does openly, admittedly say she does prefer females. She has been with females. Her first threesome was with females. But that doesn't necessarily, you have people all the time who are happily open with their friends, but might not necessarily feel like they can get to that point with people who they also consider family.
Which is true and all completely fair points. But also, like, this man is being tortured. Like, you are actively torturing this man, and you're making an effort to do it. You're making an effort to do something to remind him that you're not interested like that.
Do you think that Az thinks that they're mates? Does he feel it? I mean, we don't know. This is just speculation, but that would be some cruel cauldron drama if the cauldron tries to think, oh, you two are mates and they don't prefer each other's gender.
I don't think so, because Feyre and Rhys have a conversation about it, and Feyre asks, about the mates thing. Like, it's been so long. If there was a mating bond, wouldn't it have snapped in by now? And Rhys says, I think Az asks that every day. So,
and Az is also so he doesn't feel like he's worthy of her. Like, that poor man doesn't think he's worthy. Like, come here, let me lick your wounds or whatever else. I will take care of you, Az.
Yeah, Batty Daddy Azzy, we will take care of you.
Oh, poor thing.
But I think all of this kind of wraps up the fact that we really need an Az perspective. We need an Az book. And I know that we're getting a perspective of Az as a extra in the end.
Oh, that'll fuel everything that I will need for however long till that next book.
Exactly. So we know that Az's story isn't over yet. I mean, let's all just...
How would you even a court of something in shadows? Ooh, that could be a good title for an Az book.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Something with shadows. I'm getting distracted.
I know, I'm getting distracted thinking about it.
Sound like Sarah. She was like, wait, I've been fantasizing
about
conversation.
And I okay, so I need to focus and finish this point. The last point I want to make, and this is all excluding Tamlin, which we'll talk about later, but the last point I want to make about communication is the communication that exists between Rhys and Feyre, and kind of Rhys and the inner circle. So we know that Rhys and Feyre talk all the time, and they, at this point, pretty much don't have any secrets because they share flashes of, whatever, mind to mind. They talk down the bond.
Which is also how helpful that you don't necessarily have to communicate, and you're just here's my audio, here's my my video file. Can you look at it? Because I don't feel like talking about it.
Right. So that's really good. They're always having this sort of communication. So fabulous for them. The only thing that I really have a problem with when it comes to Rhys is how shitty he handled the heiress reveal when they went to the Court of Nightmares. He didn't communicate that was happening, and Az also knew it was happening and didn't share it to warn anybody, and that really hurt more a lot.
Right.
And it made Feyre really pissed off, and even Amren says that was the right call, Rhys, but you really screwed up the execution on that.
Right.
You should have told people.
Because that's the thing. I feel like when, as his subjects, for lack of a better word, they would have gone with Rhys. They would have followed suit, understand. And I think even more says the same thing. I wasn't going to like it, but I understand where you were coming from. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to, is the communication, to what you said, because it hurt them more that it was they were blindsided. If they at least knew what they were walking into, they didn't have to be happy about it, but they were still a united front.
Exactly. So let's move on to the High Lords meeting.
This is so good.
It's so good. So Jess, when you read the High Lords meeting, how did you feel? Like, what was your reaction to it?
I mean, I was stressed. I was happy. I just reread my notes that I had sent to you. I re-listened to the audio of Tamlin. Fucking Tamlin. I know we'll talk about it later, but I'm so over everybody and their bullshit of Tamlin needs a redemption arc. Not every single fucking person needs a redemption arc. His redemption, he brought Rhys back to life. Done. Over you. You are no value added. I'm sorry, Tamlin fans. You can go read ACOTAR 1. Like, I'm just over them. But I think it's so funny with the High Lord meeting going into it. Rhys is like, yeah, they can just believe us. And everyone's, sometimes Rhys is a little bit delusional. No, you have just been playing this evil Dark Lord for years. And now you're like, I don't understand why nobody wants to believe. Really? You don't understand? Like, maybe you were under a mountain a little too long. But I love Tarquin. Tarquin, I even told you, Rhys's Bay. We'll talk about it in ACOMAF of my crying at the kitchen table to you. But I like Tarquin's like, no, I hear things. I wasn't always High Lord, so I see everything. So it makes sense why he was the first one to respond despite the blood rubies. It was exciting. You didn't know. It was an adrenaline rush. I was stressed. I was excited. I couldn't put the book down. I was listening to the audio version, so I definitely threw my phone at some point at the Tamlin point, really, as we all know. I love everything about it. I love the confrontation. And this hasn't happened. Like, nobody has really been together since Under the Mountain. So there's a lot of, again, communication that shit needs to get put on the table. And there's going to be resentment because nobody openly really had this communication. And you know that from Vivian and Moore's reunion.
Exactly right. So having just re-listened to this, first of all, I'd like to go to the day court. That palace sounds amazing. My big takeaway from the High Lords meeting was, oh my God, I hate Baron. I hate him so much. He is such a he's just the worst.
You know how I imagine Baron looks like? I don't know if there's fan art. I really don't care. You know the Burger King King?
It's a fantastic visual I will have forever now. Thank you. It's amazing.
I'm sorry.
Oh, now I'm trying to think, like,
what did you think he looked like before?
Honestly, Baron and the Autumn King from Crescent City are one in the same to me.
Oh, yeah, I literally just shifted.
Yeah. They're one in the same. I really have problems like differentiating them. All I know is like the Autumn King in Crescent City wears like slacks and like jeans and shit. Like Baron wears like tunics, but essentially like the coloring is the same.
And I think I want to bring up real quick because we've had this conversation and I go, the Autumn Court, especially when you see all the TikToks of what such and such court looks like. And it really, at this point, like I want to be in the night court, but I just look at them all and I go, I want that court. No, I want that. Like, they're all so beautiful. And I would say, and everybody knows it's something beautiful with fall, and you had to, but also the continuity that whatever story we're reading, the king or the lord or whatever of the Autumn Court is a piece of shit. And you were like, well, yeah, because autumn is the season of death and decay. And I think that's really important. I think we forget about it because we get lost in the beauty. But you don't, if you say, oh, let's get lost in the beauty of death and decay, you sound really morbid.
Yeah. You're like, oh my God, everything is like red and all the yellow and orange and the colors. It's like, yes, because they are slowly rotting away, which is, an apt metaphor for what is happening in Baron's court. Lucian says like it's very manipulative and backstabbing, and people there are always kind of working to consolidate power. His brothers are pieces of shit. We know this. So I think that's really, really important. Me personally, even reading Throne of Glass, old men who are close-minded and just talk down to everyone drive me insane.
I mean, that still happens now. It's not just in the books. This is every day for us.
Yeah, oh my God, it's so annoying. And the way, I mean, obviously the way he speaks and treats Feyre is horrible, but it's also expected. The way that he treats his wife is really shitty. He's just the worst. And and as I mentioned before, when Az goes off on Eris, I loved that. I love that whole part. I love that Feyre was the one to go over and, kind of touch him and get him off of Eris. And then she
bring him back to okay, come on.
Yeah, like brings him back. And then she goes to the table and pours him a cup of wine. And then people start sneering at that. She's like, he's my family. I will do this for him.
And they were sneering that the fact that Az was even sitting at the table. Wasn't that the case?
Yeah, screw you guys. It's Batty Daddy Azzy. You can sit there. What's the deal? Other takeaways, I really love Helion. I love how raunchy he is. I love
how sassy he is. I told you, I was looking at my notes. I go, we would be friends, obviously.
Yeah.
Helion and I are going out in the city. I'm ready to rage. I don't even care. And even when he's another lord, and I think it's just such a vast difference because he's another high lord, and when you compare it to Baron, no wonder the High Lady of the Autumn Court was like, fuck you, Baron, I'm gonna go with this guy. He's fun, he loves life, he's not miserable. I mean, even he keeps offering hey, let's have an orgy, Asmore and Cassian, and I'm just like, what is going on? He's just so open-minded about everything and wants to have fun. And didn't he even came by he came by the inner circle to just say hi to everybody, and he was like, hey, sorry how I acted. I had to act a certain way out there, but y'all know the real me. I thought that was just so great.
Yeah, no, he's actually he's wonderful. And actually a point that I wanted to make earlier that fits in well here is I forgot that Rhys had that animal form, that he morphs into.
The bird?
What is it? I have not seen fan art of it, but Helion also has it.
Right.
So he turns into I pictured it as some sort of giant eagle or something.
Yeah, that's exactly. I imagined a giant eagle.
Yeah. So, and then Rhys turns into, they say the dark mirror of that. And Feyre couldn't figure out if it was scales or feathers. So I don't know, probably the big evil bat looking thing. But I forgot about that because when you think about transformation, I always think about Tamlin because he's always has that weird
wolf thing,
horned lion wolf weird thing.
Man bear pig.
Yeah, so I've never seen fan art of that, of what they look like. So maybe I need to dig a little bit into that. But I do like that both, night and day come together and transform at the same time and just go at it in the battle.
Wreak havoc. And I think, and even in that moment, Feyre's like, I forgot, you're so used to one form of a person. And then you go, oh, I forgot that's who they're also this warrior. They're a warrior, they're a survivor. And I think, she says something along those lines, but I think that could also be said to the people that we know. We have different, I don't want to say different personalities, but we show different selves depending on who we're around. So you have people who will say, oh my gosh, this person's such a bitch. And your friends will either be like, yeah, she is a bitch, or, well, that's because she doesn't like you. That's not the person I see. Or if you're always great around your friends and then they see you go off on somebody else because of you're protecting your loved ones, your friends will say, oh, I forgot that side of her. I'm so used to seeing X side that I forgot. Y is living in there just as strong, and she's just ready to pop off whenever the time allows it. And I feel like that's kind of what happened in that that part of the book.
No, you're absolutely right. That is it exactly. And I really felt that way about the battle in the way that Sarah describes Cassian, dancing and like being made for battle, and like battle is a symphony for him, and he dances through it.
That description was lovely. You could
was.
just you can visualize. I mean, she has her podcast or she has her soundtrack-ish playlist on Spotify, but you can just visualize the dance. It wasn't this aggressive thing, even though it is an aggressive act. It was just so beautiful.
And that's a side of Cassian that we don't see very often. It's even mentioned in the book that the soldiers hadn't seen him in a full-out battle in a long time. So that, just going back to what you're saying about certain sides and certain people see different parts of you, I thought that was really important. And then Rhys actually like using his power is something that, they always say the most powerful High Lord in history, whatever, but you don't actually see him use it very often. And when he missed like half of that army in the final battle,
so hot.
It was so hot. It's so sexy. He's just like snap, boom. So like I really enjoyed that.
That stuff, like maybe it's just the book where I'm like, do it again. That was like, do it again. That was hot.
Definitely. Just super hot. Okay, so we're gonna talk about Tamlin towards the end, but let's do top 5 moments.
Oh, right. Okay. So again, I've only read it once because every time I try to reread it, I just haven't tried to reread it. I haven't been there yet. Plus, I have so many books on my TBR. Initially, in no particular order, I will say the High Lord meeting, the battle scene, the battle scene, obviously at the end. Well, any battle scene. More coming out, Cassian and Nesta at the end when she's covering him with her body, and Cassian as seen coming to take Feyre home might be top 3. I'm not numbering anything, but that's definitely a top scene. I had to reread it twice. That reunion was more important, and that whole scene was more important to me than Rhys and Feyre's reunion. I think it was just more impactful. I think Sarah on her playlist has the certain medley from Swan Lake, and I envisioned the whole thing. I saw it happening. I was crying. I didn't realize that I loved those two characters as much as I did until that moment. It's just so beautiful. And then also, I think it was important that they trusted Feyre. They gave her all this. She had the skills. It was understanding where her level of comfort of how she was going to execute those skills to get out of that situation. Just everything from the arrival to the running across the lake to taking her home to declaring herself High Lady. Like she had known, but to openly admit it to everybody, like people outside of the inner circle. I think it was just, there are certain scenes in a book where you can perfectly visualize, and there's no way Hollywood can do it justice.
Yeah, there isn't. There's no way. Those are excellent. Those are all very excellent scenes.
Your turn.
My turn. Top 5 in no particular order. The High Lords meeting, all of it. This isn't a specific scene, but Lucian's perspective coming to Valaris. Just the way that we see Valaris through his eyes. He went in expecting to be in the Court of Nightmares. And then he says, like, there's children outside, and he's in the House of Wind, and he's overlooking Valaris. And I really like when he says, how could we, and he says we, like Tamlin, the Spring Court, and himself, how could we ever be enough? Like, how could we compare? And I think those fresh eyes really helped drive home the change in Lucian that you mentioned earlier, but also just what a kind of special place Valaris is, and what it, the magic it kind of has.
It's interesting you bring that up with the Lucian point, because him noticing kids, because as we know in the Fae world, it is not easy to procreate, and that the fact that they were happy to, and that was something he was like, there's kids, they're happy. This is, like you said, it's a whole different perspective of what he didn't even know Valaris existed to begin with. So to see all this, he's just like, oh, okay, this is not what I thought. And also I think it he maybe realize it might not, spring court isn't enough for him either after seeing it all.
Exactly. Okay, so that was 3. Of course, as you said, the scene on the ice, for all the reasons that you said, very, very special. And Cass and Nesta clutching and ready to die for each other, as we've already said. And then, and re-listening to it, it's not talked about a lot, but Feyre, in the Ouroboros, in the mirror, accepting herself, and the description in when she's talking about it in the beginning, she's like, I'm probably not going to share this with anybody, her whole like journey with the mirror. And then later on, she tells everybody at the meeting at the end about the mirror and what she saw, and she tells Rhys and she shows Rhys, and she says that like she cried and she was hysterical and she stared into it and she forgave what she saw there and she loved what she saw there. And of course that is the reflection of her truest self, and she loves and forgives herself, and she completely accepts everything that she sees. And of course, she accepts herself and all her past mistakes, and she loves herself. And it's a really wonderful message. You should love yourself.
To go off that, and I think maybe some of the things that I've been seeing on Instagram or just different forms of media is, like you said, accepting your truest self and recognizing your mistakes. And if you want to take ownership of those actions, that, and not all actions, you're not going to be perfect. We've talked about that earlier in this episode. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to have to, if you want to change, the change is there. And it reminds, I just watched this special episode of Euphoria last night. And
you did?
Oh my God, I was crying. And I just, between that and the Ouroboros, I thought it was just so beautiful. The dialogues, the understanding that you can be a piece of shit or you cannot. You have choice. You get to choose how you want this to go. And you can still accept those choices, or you can not accept them and just know who you are at your core as a person. And I think that was just because you've made other decisions in your life that doesn't necessarily affect who you are at your core. And I thought that was really important. And I think that reminds me of the Ouroboros. You've made these choices, you've done these things, you are still you. You have to be okay with the you that you live with. And my godmother got me this compact mirror from Tiffany's when I graduated high school, and I still keep it with me. And she goes, you have to be okay. You have to remember, keep this with you always, and be okay with the person that you're looking with in the mirror. And if you're okay with those choices, but if you don't like who you're looking at the mirror, then like you choose to change that, and I think that's so important for the acceptance. And I love that only so far Feyre has been the person to take ownership of who she is, because nobody, you hear that nobody really can, conquer the Ouroboros.
Yeah, they say very specifically, like, people go in to claim the Ouroboros and they go mad.
Mm-hmm.
They can't handle what they've seen there. So that's a fantastic point. We're still going to talk about Tamlin, but he's this whole other section. So
he's an episode. How much time do we have?
I think we can kind of wrap this section of it up before we talk about Tamlin. So I'm going to ask you, what are your final thoughts about this book?
I love ACOMAF more. ACOWAR is my second. I liked it. I know you're not a fan. Again, this is going off of my first read. I haven't reread it. I haven't had time to be frustrated about some of the, oh my gosh, lack of communication. I mean, I do with our conversations that we've had outside of my first read, but I still enjoy it as an emotional piece. And that's really where my final thoughts are, of the emotion that I got to just, and I think it felt like closure in that point too, because it really is tied up. You feel like that part of the storyline is tied up, even though we have ACOFAE after. I mean, I think there is that part that factors my decision too, where I just, oh my gosh, like, this world is over, this world that you introduced me to. I'll never reread it for the first time again.
Oh, that's very emotional. That's so emotional. Like, damn. I'm going to go the total opposite and say my final thoughts are, is there a word count for how many times the word unleashed or unleashing was used? Because that was also 60,000. Ugh.
Unleashed, family.
I think it's impossible to count how many times Sarah used unleashed or unleashing in this episode, because it must have been 100,000, because I felt like it was every other word, and it made me like cringy. It was like, there has to be like maybe I would just go to the thesaurus. Maybe I'll just do it myself.
We should, sometimes she needs to dive into some fanfics to see what words they're using.
See what they're using. So the repetition of the word unleashing or unleashed was pretty annoying. But what really stuck out to me in this book was Nesta's journey. And I know it's like a sidebar plot in this book, but I feel like she starts off cold. And she very closed off. She's in the House of Wind, and Farrah's not there yet. And then Farrah comes, and
she's literally in hideout. They have to hide her.
Yeah. And then they slowly bring her out. She has the dinner. She starts training with Amren.
She's reading smutty books in public.
Yeah. And then the more time that they kind of spend together, Nesta has a lot of growth, right? Like, she volunteers to go to the Court of Nightmares to look at the artifacts with Amren. She admits to Farrah that she has to use buckets to bathe because she's afraid of the bathtub because it reminds her of the cauldron. She starts opening up a little bit with Cassian. She's worried about Cassian. She's pacing the battlefield. She says Cassian's name,
which is the first time she's ever thought of somebody aside from her sister.
Exactly.
Elaine.
And then at the end, it kind of all accumulates, and she throws herself over Cassian to die together. And then she sees her father die. And then that is the end. She's closed up again. And it's just like she was getting better, and then she just falls right off a cliff. And then we know that she just dives off of the cliff in Frost and Starlight, but in this book, it's just I don't know. It really struck me.
Do you feel like your thoughts of Nesta changed? Because I know you weren't a fan of Nesta. Do you feel like you maybe not empathize, but sympathize? Well, maybe a little bit of empathy,
I mean, a little. I mean, she's still a really shitty person, but that's just my opinion. But I just, it struck me this time, this reread, that she was getting better. And then her dad came through for her, in this way that she never expected. He comes in, he saves the day, sort of. He's got the boat named after her. He says that he loves her. He's proud of her, and then he dies right in front of her. And then all the progress that she made is just gone. It's gone immediately. And I mean, I say that she's a shitty person because she takes that out on the people that are closest to her. So instead of continuing to slowly open up and communicate in a healthy way, he locks it all down again. And not only does she revert to where she was, she goes so much deeper, and it gets so much worse. That is what really stuck out for me this read.
I don't know. I don't know if TikTok has skewed. We've had this conversation that I don't know. I didn't like Nesta initially. I said, maybe there are things that I don't like about her because there are also reflective in things that I don't like about myself. But she is the person that I see a lot of myself in Nesta. And I think that's frustrating because it's the things that I don't like about her are a lot of the things that I'm just like, look in the mirror, chick. But I think there's something to be said. And I've said this from the beginning, though, I'm intrigued about her relationships. I mean, she, like you said, with her thing, with watching her dad die, there was also some closure there that she had this hate for her dad for so long. He comes through with an armada. The leading ship is named after her, and her dad finally came through. And that was also a reflection of her dad's own issues of, I wasn't a provider, and here I am. I can provide for them even for this moment. there's going to be growth there because you can't go through these experiences and not grow from them. Whether that growth is positive or negative, we don't know. So that'll be interesting. I'm just intrigued to see how everything unfolds. I don't know if part of the reason I started to lean towards Nesta is the way people depict her on TikTok. And sometimes it's so funny and I go, yeah, that's Nesta. Oh, she's just a hoot,
Shout out to Bethany Maas Trash for her fantastic Nesta.
Oh, she's the best fucking queen, Bethany.
She's so good. My final thought before we dive into Tamlin is that I ship Vasa and Lucian. I like them together. I ship them together. That's the hill. That's one of the many hills that I'll die on.
Really?
Yeah. I think Elaine is, besides being completely boring and slightly useless, I just think that she doesn't, there isn't enough oomph there. And like Lucian needs someone like fiery, someone that wants to be alive, someone that, is like willing.
It's interesting to say that because I'm thinking of when Alice in the first book was like, oh, go to Tamlin to get like information or something. He's definitely somebody you need to push back on or give some sass. And Feyre was always pushing back on him and giving him that tit for tat. And then come to this book, Tamlin knows this and sees, whenever he sees Lucian with Feyre, he knows like there's something about, obviously because Tamlin loves Feyre, but he knows that Feyre is someone that Lucian would be all about. So then that whole infiltration unfolds, which we didn't talk about that in this episode, but we could do it in the recap. I fucking love, I love the espionage of it all. Like femme fatale, bad bitch, Feyre Archeron. Yes.
Well, let's just dive right into Tamlin. We're kind of going to end this episode on a little exploration of Tamlin in this book. So let's talk about him and let's be very up clear in front. Tamlin sucks balls.
Okay. Tamlin has two saving qualities to me. He helped bring Rhys back and he brought Feyre to Prythian. Those are my two redeeming qualities. And that's why I like the TikTok where she goes, I am a young woman in the woods and I will take Rhys, I'll take Lucian, I'll even take Tamlin at this point. Bitch, me too. Just get me there.
Yeah, I'll wait in the woods for a 500-plus-year-old female to kidnap me. Please take me. Please take me. It can be Tamlin.
Just get me there.
Fine. Tamlin sucks. He where to even start? I think you have to start with his anger issues. He's violent. If you go back, obviously we're going to go back and we're going to talk about ACOTAR. That's coming obviously, but you go back and you read ACOTAR and you forgive all these red flags. And you're just like, and then you read Mist and Fury and you're like, oh, fuck him. And then you read this book and damn, right? Like he...
Exactly. I feel like we're exasperated because that's just how Tamlin is. You see the red flags, you see the anger, you see the lack of accountability, which I hated in ACOFAS. It's woe is me. I can't have anybody at the walls because Feyre had my sentries aren't here. Like, no, you had Feyre infiltrated because of what you put her through. Like, where's the accountability, sir? And there's just so many things. Even from he's not a feminist or believes in equal rights. He doesn't believe in being high lady. He only believes you're my wife. You'll be the lady of the spring court. You must always, basically, you are to be seen but not heard. And that mentality is just that. And if that's what he needs, great, maybe Elaine is his mate. But even then, as right now, Elaine seems like a throwaway character. She's also a seer. And I don't think Tamlin can handle somebody who has this power, who could be like, not even. He can't handle anybody. He deserves to be lonely. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it. He doesn't deserve happiness. I don't know where that comes from. Why does everybody have to have a happily ever after? You made your bed, now lay in it.
You make a really good point about responsibility, because let's all remember. Let's remember Ianthe. Let's remember that Tamlin and Ianthe are in the courtyard of the Spring Court, and there's that soldier there that lost the keys. Now we know that Ianthe stole the keys to let in the monsters to plot, but Tamlin's the one that lets Ianthe tell him to whip this man 21 times. He didn't have to. That wasn't something it's not a law. He felt that he needed to assert himself and show discipline, and it was a bad decision, and he's influenced by Ianthe.
And even in the second book, in ACOMAF, where he's doing the tithe because it has to be done and we need to, and then the wraiths didn't have the fish or whatever. And he goes, okay, we'll come back in a couple weeks. Fish aren't just going to come back in 2 weeks. And so then he accepted the tithe of the jewelry Feyre gave him. Who's to say, if he just had to bring them something, if the wraiths just had to bring him anything, why couldn't they have just been here's a pile of leaves, here's our tithe? He's just so high and mighty for no reason. He brings no value. He just doesn't bring any value to any of the courts. At least you have, the day court has all the technology and the reading. And then I feel with Summer Court, there's a lot of seafarer and warriors, and that's a whole thing. What is Spring Court giving me? Calanmai? A fairy orgy? Is that their only contribution?
Oh, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the yearly orgy.
And you want to call Feyre a whore? I'm sorry. I'm just really
No, exactly. Go off when Tamlin says what he says in the High Lords meeting. When he says, does she still make that little noise? When she's about to orgasm, talking about Feyre in front of everybody. Okay, let's slut shame Feyre.
Lose my shit. There is not, which is unfortunate, there is not a woman in this world who hasn't experienced a man like Tamlin to try to slut shame her. She has been with 3 people. Her first, Tamlin and Rhys. And he has fairy orgies for over 500 years.
Yeah. And he's like, oh. But that, circle back around to communication. We talked about it kind of earlier. Tamlin is bitter. He's hurt. We know that he is violent and he can't express himself and he has a bad temper. So the only way that he can kind of convey these feelings is to try to humiliate this woman that he is still deeply in love with in front of everybody. And it's just such a shitty thing to do. And I think it speaks to the other High Lords who are also kind of dude, that's really shitty. But also, how sexy is it when Rhys just rips the air out of his throat?
There's just, Rhys is sexy to begin with. We're not even going to go there. But there's certain things that just stand out, and just the calm disposition that he has while he does it, that control, please, simp for him any day.
Any day. And then I go back to Tamlin trashing the house. It's just such a stereotypical, white boy thing to do. I've seen a lot of TikToks.
He's such a fucking Chad.
Exactly. The TikToks that are oh, when I get mad, I punch through the wall. It's okay, Chad. Go to therapy.
Chad is the millennial Karen.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. But really, and I like in this book specifically, Feyre kind of pokes him a little bit when they're fighting, and this time when he explodes, there's lots of exploding in this book.
Wait, when she pokes at the beginning or
in the beginning.
Okay.
She pokes Tamlin's temper a little bit, right? So that the guards outside can hear. And when he explodes.
And she doesn't put her defenses up?
Yeah. So she lets all the like wood or whatever like scrape her up and shit so that everybody else can see the abuse. Because that's what it is. Let's be very clear.
Right.
So that everybody else can see the abuse. And then, go back to she can't use her old bedroom because he went in and trashed it. That's why she has the room across from Lucian. It's like,
well, also let's not forget that was part of, I think it might have been, I can't remember, you have a fresher take. Not only did she not want to move in, she wanted to be closer to Lucian.
Well, yeah.
So she was like, I don't know if this room is better. Like maybe I should just be on this wing of the house. Like this old room brings back such memories.
But also it had been completely sealed off because, and there's a callback in it, the room had been sealed off and it had been completely covered in thorns.
Oh.
A court of thorns and yeah. Yeah. Reread. That's a reread. So the room is totally covered in vines and thorns that came in through the window and it's trashed and everything is gone and he shredded all of her clothes and
except for Night Gore.
Yeah, and everything. So and then it plays into her plan obviously, but he didn't have to do that. Why is that? And then he trashes his study and
it all comes back to accountability. He's trashing her stuff and he has no right to. He did it to himself. He did it the second he locked her up and put her in. And again, it'll be discussed in ACOMAF episode, but he did it to himself. There's no accountability. If he has anybody to be pissed at himself. But he doesn't want to because woe is me. I'm the victim.
Well, let's go back to the fantastic High Lords meeting when he goes, he's talking to Rhys. He's like, you came in and stole my bride. And Feyre throws the gauntlet down and she goes, oh, I'm sorry. The sun was shining when I left you. So let's be clear. She, Feyre is removed from the situation. And obviously she's in a loving, happy relationship with Rhys. But I really like that she can go back and see all these red flags that she missed in ACOTAR.
Sounds like a lot of us.
Yeah. Hindsight's 2020 and her Feysight really gives her the extra 2020 to see that Tamlin is abusive. He's just a piece of shit. He's just a piece of shit. Like,
so why does everybody want him to have a redemption? Like, I'm totally with you here, which begs me to ask, why do we feel, we as in the community, not you and I, that he needs a redemption arc?
Well, he already had it. He had it.
Yes.
Right?
He had it.
He's done. It's over, period. He brought Rhys back to life. You could also say that he gave Feyre the extra boost or whatever to get out of the camp when she was trying to fly away with Briar. He comes through with Jurian and Grayson, the army. Like he's done. So I don't understand. Honestly, I really don't understand why we needed those extra scenes in Frost and Starlight. To be like, oh, so sad.
Oh, and that's also sexy when Rhys goes to Tamlin and he's like, he's really rubbing it in his face. He's like, I got it all.
Yeah, no, for real. It is. Well, everything, everything. So Tamlin's story is done and over with.
The only way I'd want to see Tamlin again is if Sarah redoes A Court of Thorn and Roses, books 1 through 3 in Rhys's perspective.
Oh, yeah.
The only way I want to see Tamlin again.
Yeah, that's the only way. And of course, we talked about it earlier, fan theories and how fan theories kind of color how we see everything. Is Elaine a good mate for Tamlin? I say mate loosely because, but.
And Tamlin said, let's not forget that Tamlin still doesn't have a mate.
Right.
People are freaking out. He's not value added anymore. So I don't know what Sarah plans on doing, if she plans on doing anything with Tamlin. But he's so hung up on Feyre. You could love somebody. And I guess maybe that's its own conversation of you can have multiple loves. That doesn't mean that they're your soulmate or they're your mate or whatever, which is clearly what Tamlin is going through, but she's not his mate.
And she never was.
Never was.
She never was. And we'll talk about it in Mist and Fury, but Farrah says that fantastic line, like, I think I would have fallen in love with the first person that showed me any sort of comfort and safety. That's what she needed at the time. And then she realized that, which is like huge, but also that's not what she needs anymore because she's her own person. And Tamlin hasn't gone through any growth. He's still the same immature Chad that he was in the beginning.
If you think about it, it's not just in the beginning of ACOTAR, but like 500 years ago, because even when him and Rhys were BFFs, he was still a piece of shit, killing his mom and I don't know if we're going to get that information of the why of killing his mom and sister, and then being pissed that Rhys's dad killed Tamlin's mom. You just killed half of his family. And now again, Tamlin wants to be upset at Rhys. Really? You literally just set up a massacre.
Oh, just fuck this guy.
Fuck this guy.
Yeah. So I think we've made it clear about how we feel about Tamlin. Not every character needs a redemption arc. And let's segue into our final thought for this episode, which is Aerys. During my reread, it became very clear that because of Aerys and his deal with Rhys, that Aerys is probably going to eventually murder his entire family and become High Lord of the Autumn Court. And Rhys has to support him. That is the plot that was hatched. So we will have more of Aerys. And Aerys says to Mor, in the history that he has with Mor,
you don't know what you're talking about.
You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
He has different little quips that he says to her.
Yeah, he's like, it was way more complicated than you think. You don't know everything, or I was protecting you. He implies that he knew that she preferred females, so he needed to.
He does imply that? I haven't reread it, so I don't know how black and white it is now.
Yeah, he implies that he knows her preference. So he was trying to make it very clear that their engagement was over and it was never going to happen. He kind of implies that he didn't have much to do with the nailing and leaving of her in the woods. That's kind of implied, but not a lot. So we're getting more of Aerys. And I guess my question, Jess, to you is, why do we need this?
I don't know if we do. Or is he a bridge to something else? And I say that with the theory, maybe not a fully formed theory, but I know I've messaged you about it, is could it mean something for long-term for Lucien? Is it something to set Lucien up for in regards to if people find out that Lucien is Helian's son? And it's been alluded to. Amren says specifically, like, in regards to Lucien taking over certain things, and I think there could be a possibility. What if Helian dies and then that power that happens when a High Lord dies goes to Lucien, and then Lucien starts overseeing that court, and Aerys is, so now you have brothers and opposing courts both becoming High Lords. I don't know. And that's something that I find interesting with the Silver Flames cover with the Day Court insignia.
Yep, that's a really good point. And of course we talked about toxic everything last week and how everybody was very, very toxic about the cover. But the fact is we don't know the story. We don't know what's going to happen. So, but again, do we need a redemption arc for Aerys? Not everybody needs a redemption arc.
Not everybody needs a redemption arc, which I think is a perfect segue for next week when we talk about redemption arcs, specifically redemption arcs and villains, and lack of redemption arcs specifically in female characters.
Yes. Women, I mean, as we know, being women are not treated the same in anything, but especially women villains, their redemption arcs or lack of, what it means, great examples, and maybe even not specifically villains, but just people who are villainized. I'm thinking specifically of Taylor Swift. So that is going to be the focus of our episode next week. So make sure to tune in for that.
And make sure you check out our Instagram page that we try to keep as active as possible at ACOFAE Podcast, ACOFAE Podcast on your Instagram feeds.
And we look forward to, seeing you next week. So have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.